Hello, everyone. Today we're starting a new book. The title is Internal Family Systems Therapy for Addictions. And we will be discussing section 1, an overview of internal family systems therapy. Let's take a moment, review the reading material, put your hand up, and we can start the discussion. Yes, Han?
I thought it was interesting that she said that healthy firefighters give useful breaks from um, a routine life. I think I forget which page it is now. It said firefighters are reactive and present focused. I'm just looking for the page number on the actually, I'm the Amazon preview, so I don't see the page number, but it's where she introduces the firefighters, and they say firefighters have always played a vital role in our lives in a balanced system where they don't need to spend every waking hour distracted from or soothing wounded parts. They can deploy their spontaneous, lively energy for other pursuits. In better circumstances, they counterbalance the drive of managers in good ways by shifting gears, changing the scenery, and promoting rest, relaxation, pleasure, fun, and novelty. So they offset the manager's focus on accomplishment with sensuous experiences. So it made me think that, gosh, if someone didn't have enough of a firefighter, even if they're quite okay overall, it could actually result in an unbalanced system like that. I just hadn't thought of that, how it actually could just be important for a healthy system to have healthy firefighters that are working. Because if you never spontaneously have rest, maybe that will lead to burnout or a worse reaction. I don't know if she goes into that, like the suppression of firefighters being a problem. Kind of almost the opposite of addiction. It's like addiction to control or something like that. But I don't know if that's something that you guys have come across in your work, that people who are too controlled, is that ever a problem? I know that's the opposite of the main thrust of the book in a sense, but it's maybe the polarized problem.
So I'm going to read this part because I didn't really notice it. And I am, wow. So I'm going to reread what you just said, especially towards the end, I think. Like firefighters in better circumstances, they counterbalance the drive of managers in good ways by shifting gears, changing the scenery, and promoting rest, relaxation, pleasure, fun, and novelty. They offset the managerial focus on accomplishment with sensuous experiences, eating chocolate, enjoying the swig of a cold drink, racing downhill on a mountain bike, or napping on a still afternoon. When we listen closely to their intentions, even firefighters who are trapped in extreme roles want us to have pleasure, rest, and a change of perspective. They add spice and adventure, as well rest and renewal to the humdrum security of a routine life. Well, yes, I love those kind of firefighters. Yes, I do have an idea, like, often with hypnosis, when I used to use hypnosis, I would ask an extreme firefighter who would smoke or take drugs to do something with this that will have the same reward, but it will be a more positive experience. Something that will still give you the sense of rest and fun, and people would, their creative mind would come up with alternatives. So we wouldn't deal with the trauma and the wound, but we would ask the firefighter to do something more socially acceptable, like maybe play the guitar or buy a puppy and, you know, spend their time with the puppy instead of, you know, doing their harmful addiction. So yeah, I'm complete.
Yeah, without going into details, I can say that I have experienced this myself. For a long time, I had very powerful managers and kind of a balanced firefighter situation for a certain period of my life. And then the shit happened. I exactly know what happened, but my firefighters couldn't, my usual firefighters couldn't handle the situation anymore. And I have been in exhaustion syndrome 3 times in my life. So I think that is what happens. If the firefighters are not balancing the manager, they will work you to exhaustion. And then very primal firefighters will have to step in to produce exhaustion so that you can't move, so that you can't do that, so you can't think. That's my theory. So I believe it's the focus on this being able to distract in more or less sensory ways is what I lost, because everything that was sensoric was instead overstimulating me when I was in that stress state. So they couldn't work their usual game. So I believe that it's very good to have access to such firefighters. Yes.
And Marlene?
Yes. Yes, this is a wonderful description of firefighters that are unburdened. And the managers that are so extreme to drive, you know, I have a familiarity with both extremes. As a manager that keeps me working, or studying till the late hours of the night. And it says here too, you know, when I'm combining, it says when an individual combines alcohol or drug use with gambling and high-risk sexual practices, which I think alcohol and drug use are friendly to sexual practices that are high risk because they disinhibit us. And of course, these short-term solutions, it says, when they continue unabated. So if they continue for years, which addiction lasts for years, they accrue long-term costs. And yet the firefighter parts are only concerned with immediate relief. And I think that's the struggle, is to pause and delay that immediate relief that supports my belief that says, this is going to work. This will take care of it right now. And there's no future thinking. And also in recovery from addiction and other programs, they encourage the firefighters, so to speak. They don't call them firefighters, but they encourage us to exercise, to eat better, to socialize, to go to the beach, to go walk in the forest. And those are things that somehow get omitted when the firefighters are in their extreme part. So when I'm drugging, I'm drugging. When I'm sexing, I'm sexing. I am not going out for a walk. I am not looking at the birds. I don't care about nature. So the world becomes extremely myopic. So I love this, that I need my firefighter parts, but they need to be healthy. Thank you. I'm done.
Yes, Han?
Thank you. Oh. Does someone else have their raised hand? Oh, thank you everyone for, yeah, it's super helpful. And it makes me think that once I think I heard somewhere a suggestion of addiction, which was the progressive narrowing of what brings us pleasure. And then perhaps like then, and I really relate also to what Maha said about just there are some times when I just cannot feel pleasure from things because I'm just so stuck in this like stress or work, or, you know, I just need to get stuff done and need to like think about the future and things like that. And it can be just so wearing to not have that mindset where you can just enjoy the moment. And there is something about cultivating a healthy firefighter system where instead of the progressive narrowing of what brings pleasure, maybe you can progressively expand what can bring pleasure, because I suppose the essence of a healthy firefighter is you are feeling that momentary pleasure, you know, whether through mindfulness or whatever, and to actually feel that feeling of reward and satisfaction, but in a way that's, you know, conducive to long-term good living and not damaging to yourself, and to actually be able to feel the sense of reward equivalent to perhaps previously would have been something more damaging like drugs or, you know, something like that. And also just to be able to feel it at all versus like having a managerial system that's so tight and locked down that doesn't let you feel, you know, sensory pleasures or momentary breaks. Yeah, so thank you. That's very insightful and helpful.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I've just come off the phone with two people, so it's fresh in my mind. I deal with a lot of people who's got addictions, but you know, what's clear from people I'm talking with this week, you know, people who are getting into serious life trouble when addictions are not just, yes, they bring pleasure in the short term, but they progress to breaking up relationships, to trouble with the law. I spoke to somebody this week whose mother was drinking and she fell over and hit her head and died. You know, there's that side of it. And then therefore the desperation of that's a firefighter that's doing whatever to deal with whatever underlying issues need to be addressed. But then there's the desperation of going to the other side to manage this, to try to control this, to shift into the managerial. And like she's on the exercises at the end of that section 1, she talked about getting to know a manager and getting to know a firefighter, and the whole dynamic of speaking to the manager and the firefighter, that they can become, well, in IFS terms, unburdened, or in program talk person, which is the same thing, surrendering, so that it becomes a surrender to something else which can take over this work of repair and healing, and ultimately removal or getting out of the dynamic of the part. I mean, in the program, they say, and it's difficult for me to separate IFS, and because I've spent 35 years in the program, so I've got a lot of that going on with me. But, you know, we will not regret the past, nor we wish to shut the door on it. But the people I spoke to this week, and, oh, well, 2 of them definitely are not in that space at the moment. They're very much into pain. They can't think, well, this is all whatever. But what I'm saying is that the letting go in IFS terms, to let the core self, which has the compassion and the strength, to mean that the parts can relax and unburden. And there doesn't have to be the firefighter, and there doesn't have to be the manager, because the core self can, the self-leadership. Oh, yeah, and yeah, there is the appreciation that they play a role. So for me, in my life these days, chocolate is a thing. So, and I'm diabetic. So it is an issue for me, but I'm loving chocolate a lot at the moment, which is much better than some of the stuff I've come from in my past. I'm happy that I'm with chocolate, and gaming is my other thing. So, you know, but that in itself can be a problem. For me, it is. I'm spending far too much money on something that's a digital whatever. But anyway, that is what it is. That's my inner critic coming out. But anyway, there we go. So yeah. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I have a question again around the same topic. So I do understand that firefighters are, as you know, wow, They're godsend. They're great to have. You know, our like manager can be a workaholic, work until you feel like burned out. And then the firefighter will come in and say, let's watch Netflix. Let's take a break. You've worked too hard. Your manager has worked very hard. We can't take it anymore. Let's watch Netflix. And that is brilliant. Gives the system a rest. But, you know, my question comes to that, you know, like Paul mentioned, and before your firefighter would have been addicted to some other stuff. Now it's addicted to chocolate, which is much better than other stuff. And I am curious, like, you know, for example, my firefighter, I love chocolate. And I recently went back to jogging. And that's much more like socially acceptable, better for my well-being. But I'm still thinking, you know, even that one, the spiritual bypass with meditation. That could be a manager or a firefighter. But that's, again, socially acceptable. It's wonderful. It's amazing. You know, or you can say like, oh, I'm a Buddhist meditator. People love it. And what's going on behind the scenes? It's like, you know, firefighter energy or manager energy, trying to save the system, the pain. That spiritual bypass. But, you know, I have a sense that it's much better to be addicted to meditation than chocolate. And maybe that which is more like socially acceptable and better for you might be even better for the system. You know, if I was addicted to alcohol, okay, and not, you know, what's your choice? Say, for example, alcohol and meditation. Oh yeah, I'm addicted to alcohol. That can really mess up all the other parts. But the spirituality is, you know, it's not doing so much harm to the rest of the system. It's okay. So it's a little bit ironic, okay, because, okay, I understand we need to go and save the vulnerable parts. I get it. So yeah, I can see a lot of hands up. I'm going to stop talking. Who's next? Is it Anne next? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Vana. It's such an excellent point. In Anna Lemke, who's a professor at Stanford, has a book called Dopamine Nation, where she talks about the nature of addiction. And I think absolutely certain addictions are more lend themselves better to healthy life. So if you're spiritual bypassing in the extreme, you could lose everything, just like an alcoholic. I think you could lose all your relationships and your livelihood and all those things and be in the woods, you know, wandering around. But it's less likely to happen. In her book, she did have an example of someone who was an addict to, I don't know if it was a drug, and then they recovered and they were addicts to running, and then they become addicted to water, and they were drinking so much water they almost died. So even like very socially acceptable, harmless, quote, harmless addictions can become harmful in the extreme. But I think it is less likely, you know, less even biologically likely. Certain things are much more even biologically addictive. And I thought also really interesting your earlier point that it's really the mindset, or not mindset, but even the actual underneath happenings that determines whether it's healthy, unhealthy, managerial, or firefighter. Because I thought your running example is very interesting, because I do work out every day, but it definitely does not give me the pleasure of eating chocolate. It's not a replacement. It'll help me eat less chocolate, but it definitely is not the same. For someone else, I'm sure running is like a firefighter. Like they love running so much, they get the runner's high and all that stuff. And for me, it's effort. It's more work. It's my manager saying you have to exercise. You know, it's so yeah. For every external behavior, whether it's a healthy or unhealthy firefighter or manager, will differ, I think, depending on what actually is feeling like inside, and maybe even biologically, what biological processes are happening inside, you know, dopamine wise, etc. So yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. Maya next.
Yeah, I had at least like 3 different thoughts or like impulses hearing you say that, Vana. One is that spiritual bypassing can be very harmful to other people. I got really seriously hurt by a person who was running a retreat who was using her spirituality. I don't know if it was a manager or a firefighter, but like, it clearly was not helpful. So even if meditating seems safe compared to something that really tears on your physical body, I think you can also go places that are not really good for you. That's my conclusion from that experience. If you're running from something, it doesn't matter if you go up or down. You're still going away from your problem. And that's going to bring that problem to other people in the end. So the second thing is, I think what's really interesting is when you can engage in things that are dopamine stimulating and gives you relaxation to your body, that are also socially accepted as something valuable, I think you get hits on both managers and firefighters at the same time. Because the manager often wants us to be socially normal or acceptable or high ranking. And so if you're a runner, of course, it feels better for the shame sensitive parts than if you offloaded all that sense of stress with a bunch of chocolate. Because everybody knows that the runner, just like the person who get up early in the morning, is better, in huge quotation marks, than the person who sleeps in. I slept in today. Actually didn't. Weird. I always sleep in. You know what I'm saying? I think we have to turn that piece around and watch it from a couple of different directions before we say it's better or it's worse. Because how are they using it? How are we using it? How am I getting by with it, whatever it is that I'm doing? I also have a personal friend who's using exercise to, what she says, clear her mind, but it's wreaking havoc on some parts of her body at the same time. So is it good or bad? Who knows?
Yes. Tricky. And I'm still a little confused around this. So let's hear from Paul.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say it's about, for me, when I look at spirituality, it's about authentic spirituality. Years ago, I sort of did a sort of fairly deep dive into this. There's a book that I read called When God Becomes a Drug, which covers all aspects of when we use religion or spirituality, or what you were saying, it becomes an addictive process as opposed to authentic. So at the time I was looking into cult behavior as well, when it becomes cultish, when it becomes a way of a person spending their whole life focused on religion or spirituality in a way that is imbalanced, so that, for example, somebody who spends all the time with the religion and ignores the family needs of being with people authentically or whatever. It's on a, it's on a spectrum. So there's a one thing of an addictive, that's the point, the firefighter can latch onto anything, even spirituality. Whereas when she says on the last page, actually in the book, page 17, what if we could help the firefighter so they didn't have to handle the vulnerable parts alone? Again, it's back to that point of the spiritual self of who we are at our core, the true self, the authentic self, and the self that some of us think there's a higher self, which is something we don't need to be addicted to, but that's something we can be carried by in order to unburden the firefighter and the manager, if the manager is overworking, doing too much, the polarization between the two, the manager and the firefighter. But then it's tuning into, that's where, I mean, and it's this thing, we don't always live in this core self. We don't have to be in this, we're always partly blended, but with addiction, and certainly when it's serious, then it's about how to let go of, just repeat what I said before, how to work to let go of, and that requires learning to tune into that part that within us that is not a part, whatever language you want to use for that. So yeah, but certainly it can become, even, you know, in my 12-step fellowship, that's got what I call 12-step Nazis, those who treat the program as a religiously and addictively and become so, the very thing that they're going to can become a problem because they're so addicted to the program. But that's a process as well. So, and I've worked with quite a few of those people to help them to not be so hard on themselves. So anyway, yeah, thanks.
Great. And
I love the point that a healthy firefighter system is open to managers also being there and flexibly, and I guess vice versa, a healthy manager system is open flexibly to healthy firefighters, and that they're really connected to each other, and that's actually what's balanced. And then Paul's later point about self-energy, and to the extent that one can access that, maybe a presence of self is what allows this presence of both managers and firefighters to be in harmony. And that actually allows the kind of that flexible harmony that then prevents it from becoming the unhealthy addiction. And I guess the difference between adding to what Kaha said about the addictions that are the more socially acceptable ones that bring in and allow for, let's say, socializing or more manager balance. I guess there's certain ways of approaching whether it's running or spirituality or or anything, there's kinds that help you be more present so that you can then live more flexibly overall. Like if you sleep in and you really feel rested, and then you're able to be present to your work and people better throughout the day, or if your spiritual practice allows you to be more present, hopefully, then that's allowing managers and self to be welcome. Whereas I suppose the unhealthy version is if you sleep in and become like totally disconnected, or you become so spiritually focused on an ecstatic experience or your cloud-like experience, but you're so disconnected from other mindsets and ways of being and ways of interacting, that narrowing then becomes this closed firefighter system that doesn't allow for managers, and vice versa. If your manager system that becomes so closed you can no longer enjoy a healthy firefighter, then maybe those are the problem, that's the imbalance that leads to these kind of problems.
Marlene?
Thank you, Anne. That was great. I'm looking at common behaviors of firefighter parts in addictive systems. Now, I always think that the behaviors that are addictive are extreme and overstimulating, but here is one that is understimulating, and it's the one in the last part, dissociating, tuning out, getting lost, or lacking awareness of the present. That resonates with me. This is the other side of, so this is not very stimulating. This is like the opposite. I'm dissociating. I can't get into action. I'm passive. I'm paralyzed. I have times where I experience this, like the managers are exhausted. They can't do it anymore. They're overwhelmed. The work will never be finished is the feeling. And the way to deal with that for me sometimes is to completely dissociate and to be numb and not to do anything that's in front of me, which can then bring out, the inner critic, of course. And then when the inner critic gets more loud, gets more anxious for me to get to do things, the dissociative part shuts down even more and refuses. So it becomes this battling, polarized parts that are quite physically exhausting. And then, so nothing gets done for a few days. And then the part that says, oh my God, we can't live this way, you got to do stuff, gets back into motion. So that was interesting. And then the other part, fantasizing about idealized images of success, power, or perfect relationships. You know, I have idealized images of what my house should be like. You know, the roof shouldn't leak. The rats shouldn't come in through the holes in the walls and eat my shoes that were my favorite. You know, that happened. And you know, I have a very freaked out part about that this isn't right, but fixing it is another story. Thank you. I am done.
Now, I have a question. You know, like before, when I used to do hypnosis, I would ask the creative mind to come up with solutions and alternative jobs for the part. So, you know, if somebody doesn't want to stop, wants to stop smoking, the creative part would come up with loads of other jobs. And, you know, typically, most of the clients would be, they enjoyed this process. They forget to smoke. They had strong reasons. We use different ways, you know. And I love this what neuroscience says. Cells that fire together wire together. So in your mind, when you have trigger, and instead of smoking, you know, drinking water, for example, you keep doing that. That's your reality simulator. You know? I'm saying water. It could be something different, whatever somebody explores, you know. And for me, instead of eating chocolate, eating a fruit or drinking a cup of tea or something. You keep practicing that. Of course, it does need practice, yeah, because you still have the vulnerable parts. But it is amazing, you know, when a client comes to see you and they want this result, you know, I'm not entirely sure, because IFS says go and work with the vulnerable parts. And I am saying, what about giving the client what they want now, and also give them the option of working with the vulnerable parts, because that can take, possibly it can take a lot longer. Yeah, I don't know, Christina? I'm complete.
I haven't, as I said, I haven't read the chapter because I don't have the book, but I wonder if the author makes a clear distinction between a good addictive parts and bad, unserving addictive parts. Are there parts that can that can operate in partnership with the self, according to the writer? That's a question.
The virtues of character.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is whether the writer of the book makes a distinction between good addictive parts and bad addictive parts. Bad in the sense that are not operating in partnership with the self. They're not serving
No, I
you.
don't think it is making I don't think she is, because, you know, when they're driven by pain, normally it's not is driven by, you know, there's an agenda. It's not harmony in the system. So whatever it is, you know, that's my understanding. And if you have a firefighters, I don't know, that's my understanding, but typically there is pain in the system. There's no harmony. It's not like the system is not happy. So even if it's a healthy and good for you firefighter, yeah, I'm not.
So how can you distinguish a part which is addictive? I mean, are there a criteria upon which you can say this is an addictive parts?
You know, she does describe what the firefighters and the characteristics of firefighters and managers. And I will maybe share the page, I don't know, or talk about it. She's got a very beautiful diagram. Let's see. I do have. I have it on Kindle and I have the book. So if I will look for the diagram. Just here's the diagram actually. And she says for the firefighters, these are the parts we reject or conceal. They soothe or distract from emotional pain, are present-oriented, are reactive. And I love that because she's making the distinction. Firefighters are present-oriented, like take action now. Let's soothe now. Managers are future-oriented. Exiles are past-oriented. This is I love this diagram. The system balancing act. Yes, because the system is striving for balance. The more pain there is, the exile carries a lot of pain, the more extreme the other parts, firefighters, will show up as in a more extreme role. Yeah. So Mark, I'm complete. So I don't know if you want to add to this.
I just had something I wanted to mention, the cells that fire together, wire together. I love that phrase that you used. And one of the things I've read in many books about changing and getting rid of bad habits is when you do something like do the walk or the meditation instead of, taking that drink or smoking that cigarette or stuffing yourself with a bunch of junk food or stuff, then whenever you do that, to really celebrate the fact that that's you, that's the new you, that's the self. And because my tendency is whenever I do that, before I learned about that concept, is to, okay, it did that. That was great. Kind of, but not to really celebrate it. And the opposite thing is whenever you do indulge in the TV or the smoking or the drinking or the whatever, then you just beat the hell out of yourself. And that just reinforces the inner critic and the hating yourself and what was that book we just finished? Shame and guilt, shame and guilt, shame and guilt. So the opposite of that is when you go for a walk and it's like, I was going to just smoke that cigarette. I was going to just sit and binge on TV for the next 3 hours and stuff myself with a bunch of junk food to get rid of my feelings, is to do the thing that's related to that. Celebrate, because your whole brain, that helps your brain to rewire and realize there's endorphins, there's enjoyment, there's happiness, there's joy in doing the thing that I want to do more of instead of just, so anyway, I loved your phrase, Vana, cells that fire together, wire together. And I think neuroscience and what we're learning is just huge breakthrough in helping people to make changes and helping researchers in IFS in all areas understand, if we understand how the brain works and all these hormones and all these endorphins and stuff, that's going to help people move towards being more self-led and help make a better world and a better families and better individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I think Frank Anderson talks a lot about neuroscience and how it relates to IFS, how also IFS helps change someone's brain. How did you call it? The neurology of the brain.
Neuroscience is
Neuroscience.
what it's called a lot of times nowadays. Neuroscience.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
I think they refer to it as neuroplasticity.
Yeah, that's one of the things they've discovered about neuroscience is a basic idea that your brain could change,
Yes.
Yep.
So Rick Hansen is he's a mindfulness teacher and a clinical psychologist who writes a lot about neuroplasticity related to psychology and mindfulness and healing. And he has this model of really taking in the good, so practicing feeling pleasure and celebrating and embodying it, and the steps of like feeling the physical sensations of these small good things that happen, because we so often overlook it and it's very hard to celebrate and feel pleasure. And so thinking about also what Mark said, I was thinking like a healthy, balanced firefighter manager system is one that's able to celebrate and able to feel pleasure in the healthy way. And it's when you cannot feel healthy pleasure and celebration that then maybe it goes towards the unhealthy addiction firefighter responses or the over clamped down managerial responses. So in a way, along with healing hurt, maybe there is like something where it's beneficial to practice feeling celebration and pleasure, because I can know that it's good to celebrate, but it's not easy to do. I can like, okay, today I didn't, wasn't unhealthy, I didn't overeat and I exercised or something or did my work, but to really allow myself to feel great about it is not easy. It's not, I don't automatically trust that, oh, that's amazing, now all of life's problems are okay, because I'll probably still just think, well, that's the very least I could do, So it's I think learning to celebrate is a skill almost, if it doesn't come naturally, potentially. And same for taking pleasure in something that's more moderate, right? Like to be able to eat chocolate and not just be in oblivion of like, oh my gosh, I just want to eat a whole bag of everything, but instead to get the same satisfaction out of savoring it in a present way where I know I can stop, but it still feels so good, to be able to have that kind of pleasure where you feel balanced is, I guess, cultivating its own ability. Yeah. Oh, and Rick Hansen has a book called Neurodharma, which is all about the neuroplasticity of healthy change and psychological change as well on this topic. That's all. I'm complete.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah. Martin?
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the firefighter does not understand the idea of not feeling pleasure because it's seeking pleasure. But there is anhedonia, which means not able to feel pleasure. And this is part of addiction. It's part of my addiction. I'm addicted to cannabis. I want to stop cannabis. Today I'm not smoking. But what I'm aware of is that the tolerance to this drug and any other drug of pleasure that elicits dopamine and other neurotransmitters, there's a diminished effect with tolerance. And the diminished effect means there is an anhedonia with not just a drug, but with other pleasures. So other pleasures are diminished because the drug exceeded that type of pleasure. And now neither the drug nor the natural pleasures are pleasurable. And I think that's why it's difficult to stay stopped, because of that period in between healing the deficiency in the neurotransmitters because of the down regulation. And that's a little scientific. The brain changes and it doesn't absorb what it used to. And there is lack of pleasure in still using. And you can use and use and use and not feel anything. And that's the jumping off place. That's hitting bottom. And supposedly that will catapult me into wanting recovery more than continuing this insane cycle of self-destruction. So anhedonia is a real thing. Thank you. I am finished.
Thank you. Marlene, to me, it looks like, okay, there is a firefighter trying seeking pleasure, and then that is exhausting. There is, and then it's like, okay, let's seek recovery. That's might be another manager, or might be another firefighter. There's a section in this book called unblending. And I think this is the solution. You know, you can have whatever you want to have, you know, managers, extreme managers. And I want to quickly just read out this triangle, okay? Because it gives a definition of what a firefighter, manager, and exile is. So manager, these are the parts we over identify with. They attempt to stabilize or improve the system, are future oriented, are proactive. And then the firefighters I read before, I'll go over it as quick. These are the parts we reject or conceal, soothe or they soothe or distract from emotional pain, are present oriented, are reactive. And the exiles, these are the parts we repress or ignore. They absorb energy. Yeah, we can feel exhausted. Yeah, they are definitely, they absorb energy. Are past oriented, are overwhelming. And I do think you can still have that system, that craziness, chaotic system. And she talks here in the section on blending, page 9 in the book, and she says about sometimes a rush of parts can come in. You know, one thought after the other, one emotion after the other, physical sensation. And if you can unblend, then you have access to the middle part, to the self. When you have that bit of self, you can really connect and see what, you know, what the firefighter needs. Why are they doing the addiction? How can you, at the end, there are some questions like, how can I support you? What kind of support? What if, okay, here at the end, there's like the hypothetical what ifs to help apart and blend. What if you had support? There are quite a few questions. What ifs? What if there was another way to handle this vulnerability? What if was an effective way out of this chaotic, addictive cycle? But I think you first need that connection between self and part. And I love Dick Swartz meditations, the path meditation, you know, but I love it more if I, like, you know, Dick Swartz with his path meditation leaves the parts behind. And I would love it more if you know, if self holds hands with, you know, parts are walking along the, you know, on the path alongside. And they're having a little chat. That meditation for me, for personally, is more powerful than leaving the parts behind completely. It's like a form of blending and connecting. And thank you for listening. Yes, Anne?
Yeah, it occurs to me that maybe it's also the importance of keeping an eye on the whole system, which is the self energy that allows that. So in addiction, they say what happens is because every time you have pleasure, and there's different kinds of pleasure, there's like your whole brain can be flooded with dopamine, or you can have localized dopamine release. And certain substances, maybe I forget, maybe cigarettes is more like floods the whole brain, and that adds to the addictive properties of something. And so if you have regardless, when you have a more addictive response, what happens is the pleasure immediately is followed by pain. Like this is not the exile pain, but simply the pain of craving, of not having that pleasure. You're like in this desert of dopamine immediately after, which then causes you to want more, but it doesn't rebalance. The pleasure and pain doesn't rebalance perfectly. Every time you get more pleasure and pain cycles, the pleasure decreases and the pain increases in that local desire, that local cycle of wanting, which is what Marlene was talking about with the anhedonia that sets in with addiction. And I was thinking to get out of that, you know, because you're still just like, oh, but then now I have the pain, not just my exile pain, but my local, like, local addiction pain that comes from this dopamine imbalance seesaw that's happening. I think what would help is that if self is present to see the wider system, to say, well, this is a very, very small part of my psyche, of my life, of my needs, and this current like pain that I'm feeling regarding just wanting the substance itself, even forget about my past, is just still a small part of this overall life. And I think when the self maybe is helping, I think I loved, Vana, what you said about walking alongside all the parts, because they hold our memories, they hold our balance, they hold all the different aspects of getting what we need. And so, yeah, maybe that's also self is there not just to hold harmony, but to actually to make sure every part of us is seen. And when addiction happens, we get so narrow, I guess, and we're only focused on that one pleasure or pain part. Yeah, I'm complete.
Yeah, I want to add to that, because she mentions there's a tool here in this chapter, the section 1, there's a tool. She says the mini unblend for quick calming. And there are three steps in this tool. Pause, breathe, notice. That's the title of this tool, the mini unblend for quick calming. And I have it on my Kindle. It should be, what page? Yeah, page 10 in the book. It's page 10 in the book, yeah. But again, this one, she talks about client therapist. And I think we can use the mini unblend. We can give that tool to clients to use on their own. Because in this context, she talks about therapy. She says, we recommend a mini unblend, pause, breathe, notice, which welcomes the client's whole system just as it is right now. Here's how to do it. We start with attuned, concerned listening and no agenda. We let the client spill all the information they need to. If it feels right, we make a mirroring statement or two or ask a clarifying question. And after a short while, we validate how hard the client has been trying. Notice all they've been holding this week or acknowledge all they had to do just to get here. And then suggest pausing to breathe together. When the client comes, we can speak with the blended part directly, or the client can choose a target part for inquiry. Thank you. And I'm complete here. Paul?
Yeah, I posted a book in the chat, which is pre-IFS, but is an excellent book by a psychotherapist it's about the self and the spirituality of addictions. And he talks about very clearly about that neuroplasticity. I don't know if he calls it that, but about that you need, like Marlene was talking about, you need to take more to get the same hit, because your brain adjusts to the increase of the whatever it is, the addictive process. If it's serious, a very serious addiction, the brain adapts to that. He doesn't talk about in terms of serious. I can't remember. He talks about, I don't know, chocolate or something that is familiar to most people. So he doesn't go into the heavy addiction. He goes into, but he very well explains. I remember I read it years back, that dynamic between the brain adjusting to the input of the substance or process, because there's two types of addiction. You got substance addiction, you got process addiction, which is like sex or workaholism or something that comes from within us, as opposed to something that we take in. So yeah, and then the brain adjusts, and then we have to get more, we have to do more to get the same hit, and that carries on until, with addictions, they can lead to death ultimately, because if they're very serious, because we're doing more and more of whatever to get the same hit, and ultimately the hit gets weaker and weaker because the brain. But that's an excellent book on that subject. So yeah, by Gerald May, his name is.
Yeah, Addiction and Grace, Love and Spirituality in the Healing of Addictions.
Yeah.
Gerald May.
He's a very good writer. He's very readable.
Yeah. So does he talk about trauma as well, and past trauma and how that relates to addiction?
Yeah, it's years since I read the book. No doubt it does, because he's a psychotherapist. I mean, he talks about all sorts of things. I don't know if he talks specifically about trauma. I mean, as I remember him talking about addiction, but in a very accessible way. It was about something that everybody, it might be food, it might be, I can't remember what examples he used now, but it was one of the books that really, it's a very gentle book, but it's got a lot of insight. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for sharing this resource. And I have a question about the exercises, something a little bit silly, but yes, she talks, I will ask here. She talks about, like getting to know a firefighter, the client exercise. It's at the end of the chapter, or yeah. And she talks about the one-way mirror. She says, point 2. Once you've identified the firefighter, place that part on the far side of a one-way mirror and invite it to be active and do what it usually does while you observe. Notice its body language and facial expressions. Is it happy and relaxed? Tense and overstimulated? Drowsy and checked out? So that's quite interesting. I've not heard that one-way mirror before. So is it like, the one where they interrogate you and, it's like a reflective mirror? Is that what it is? Am I getting it right? So I can see the part, but the part cannot see me?
Yeah.
And you get the part maybe like, myself eating chocolate. I'm seeing myself over there eating chocolate furiously. And I'm observing how the part feels and how it reacts and what it does. This is quite an interesting. She talks about the one-way mirror for the manager as well. Often, parts, if you ask for an image of the part, it might not be you, it might be a younger you, it might be a metaphorical something. It could be a wall, it could be a ball, it could be absolutely anything. So, but here, what I'm getting is she is asking, I don't know, how do you guys, she's asking, like, like a role play. Is it?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love the idea of watching me from afar, like eating too much chocolate or like working too hard and what I look like and whatever the essence I'm giving off in that moment. It's an amazing idea. I never thought to do that before. Yeah, it's just wonderful. I hope it'll snap me out if I ever am stuck in those things in the coming future.
Yeah. It's this book, Chris Berry's Creating Healing Circles, also mentions something, and it's a role play.
Oh, can you post it? Great.
Book,
okay.
Yeah, I will post the book.
Creating.
He calls it sculpting, and actually, I have had an experience of sculpting with we were trying it with some other people. And it's so I would be like how I do what I do, I go into this role of the part, and then the other person will mirror. And when I'm in self, and I'm like seeing myself in the other person, how I react. But
I love it.
Yeah, the way she does it
so
is more
fun.
like mental rather than
Yes.
It's mental.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I will post the book in a minute.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And Is there anything else? Are we okay to close for today? Anything else for discussion? We'll move on to chapter, section 2. I will leave it for like a few seconds if anyone else wants to discuss anything else. Otherwise, we can move to private time. Next week will be section 2, or the week after, yeah. Section 2, conceptualizing addiction. And thank you for today. And we're closing today. Thank you. And I'll see you next time. And I pause or stop recording.